Hey, so welcome to this video. I'm gonna warn you just ahead of time, you've probably seen the timestamp on this video, but this video is probably going to be a long one. Pretty much what this video is going to be covering, if you're going to tell from this title, is I'm just going to tell you all about masquerades. I'm going to tell you all about the process. I'm going to give you some tips and tricks. I have a Google form that I left for the community to fill out where their tips and some questions. At the start here, I kind of want to just go over what a masquerade is, because while some of us may know, a lot of us probably don't. I am also going to have timestamps and everything for you as well. We are going to be going over every single detail when it comes to masquerades and what to expect. Also, this video might look like ass because I'm recording this on my webcam because my camera is packed up in that suitcase and also not charged. I don't feel like doing all of that. So, but I guess before we get started, I should introduce myself. My name is Ghost. I have been a cosplayer since 2009, and I've been in and out of masquerades or cosplay competitions, as they're also called, for many years now. I started back in 2015. I took a big break, during 2020 and 2021 for obvious reasons, but I have been competing a lot more regularly since then. I am considered a masterclass craftsman with rewards such as best novice performance, 2 best in show rewards, and 2 master rewards, which kind of makes me a little bit of a professional on this topic. I'm totally kidding, by the way. I am not claiming to be a professional within this subject at all. I just wanted to make a video to share my own thoughts, my own experiences with masquerades, and what I feel like is useful for people who might be interested in competing in the future and stuff like that. But I do feel like my credentials do make it right for me to be able to talk about this subject. So, but also if I'm wrong about anything, feel free to, I don't know, give me 50 bucks, I guess. Now, before we get started in general, what is a masquerade? Masquerades, which can also be referred as cosplay competitions, is an event for cosplayers to, well, compete against each other. Usually within these competitions, you can win rewards like cash prizes, trophies, or if you get into the really big competitions, you can even win trips to other countries to take part in their competitions. Typically within masquerades, there are 2 categories you can compete in. Craftsmanship, which focuses solely on the skill with making cosplays, would it be sewing, foam work, or whatever it might be. Now, I do want to note from the very, very start, before we move on to anything else, a lot of conventions require you to make a certain percentage of your cosplay to be considered craftsman. If you are just taking a bunch of thrifted items and just using them as is, not altering them, not adding any detail to them or anything like that, that's not really going to be considered a craftsmanship, and most likely you're not going to get accepted within the competition. Typically, the normal amount of percentage that I usually see that conventions ask for about how much you make of the cosplay is usually 75% or more. So going back to my thrifted thing, say if I was going to be doing a cowboy character, if I just bought jeans and just wore them as is, it's not really going to get me a lot of points. But if I wore jeans, transformed them into assless chaps, added a bunch of details to it, and everything like that, then it will count for a little bit more points and would count to a little bit more of the percentage of how much is handmade. So another good example is you can't just go buy a pre-made cosplay, like fix it so that it fits you and then call it a day. That's going to be considered cheating. I'm just letting you know. I probably explained that really badly, but hopefully you get the idea of what I'm talking about. You also cannot enter with cosplays that you commission someone to make. Like, the only exception to that is if the person who you commissioned for the cosplay is competing with you. For example, just recently at PortCon Maine, I made all 4 of my group's cosplays, but I was also in the competition, so it still counted. So, and then the second category is performances, which focuses solely on, well, a performance you put on. Think of it as kind of like a theater performance, or if you like go and see a play, they're very similar to that. They can also be dance performances as well, for my idols out there, even though I know a lot of masquerades don't really like us or accept us within the masquerades, but that's a whole other video we can do. With this category, if you're only doing performance, you don't have to worry about craftsmanship. You can enter with pre-made cosplays, just again, as long as you're not entering also with craftsmanship. Which brings me to my next point. You can also enter as both categories. So if you are someone who makes your own cosplays and you want to perform within these masquerades, it's allowed. This category actually tends to be a lot more popular with cosplayers because a lot of cosplayers like that performance aspect while also liking being able to make their own cosplays they can show on stage as well. I do also want to know about craftsmanship before we move on. You also have the option to be part of a catwalk where you go on stage, you pose a couple of times and walk off. This is not really required for craftsmanship stuff, but it could just be a fun way for you to show off your cosplay on stage so that everyone can see it. With these categories, there are levels you can enter under. Typically, these levels are novice, intermediate, which can also sometimes be called journeyman, and masters. There might be some conventions that do intermediate and journeyman as two separate categories, but a lot of the time that tends to be the three main levels you can kind of enter under. I will say that these levels may differ from con to con, and also the requirements for certain levels might also be different. Some conventions do it based on how many rewards you won before, and some don't. It's always recommended to read the convention rules just to try to see where you might fit in. But do keep in mind that if you entered as a novice and maybe get pushed up to intermediate or masters with like a major reward, which is stuff that can happen, by the way, and you decide to stay in those levels, you cannot move back down to previous levels. So for example, you can't go from novice to intermediate back down to novice. It's just more frowned upon that if you move up to a higher level, win rewards there, and then you decide, actually, I'm going to go back a level. It's usually not recommended. Hey, editor's note here. I do want to say and kind of making a point though, while conventions do have these prize requirements to be considered for a certain level, there's not really a way for them to go through and check. So if you are more comfortable with first entering in as say like masters because you feel like that your craftsmanship is at that level, there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that. But it is pretty common that if a cosplayer does not have any experience within a competition, that they enter as novice and they just quickly move up to masters. Now, what type of rewards can you normally see at masquerades? Like how many people can typically win within a masquerade? It does differ from convention to convention, but the typical ones is best craftsmanship in each level, best performance in each level, and sometimes best overall in each level. So it can be best novice craftsmanship, best novice performance, overall best novice, best masters, stuff like that. Then you have the major rewards, which is best overall performance, best overall craftsmanship, and the biggest reward, which is the best in show. Like I said, these are typically considered as the main rewards, the major rewards. So if you see a convention's rules talking about, for this level, you have to win at least 5 major rewards, usually they're talking about those. So usually it's best craftsmanship within your level, best performance, stuff like that. Some people believe that best in show is more rewarded to people who do both craftsmanship and performance. That is so far from the truth. I myself have won best in shows with just my craftsmanship alone. And I have also had friends who've won best in show with only performances. At the end of the day, it really comes down to the wire and who impresses the judges more, which we'll also go through with that near the end of the video. And now that you guys know what a masquerade is and the rewards and so on, let's talk about the typical experience you have to go through when it comes to being part of these competitions. Now, I will say, while I do share my experiences, I do have more experiences in just the craftsmanship aspect because typically I don't really do performances because I usually enter alone and I just get scared to go on stage and perform by myself. But I did recently do my first skit-like entry with friends and got best in show, so kind of a big deal. And like I said, we are going to start from the very, very beginning. And that beginning starts with signups. Just like my other points before, these typically depend from convention to convention. I've had some conventions when I'm entering ask me every question under the sun as to why I'm entering. I'm honestly surprised some of them haven't asked for my social security number. And then I've had other conventions that have asked me 3 questions. So if you ever are entering into something and the form is long and very detailed, honestly, to me personally, that's kind of a good sign. But the typical questions that you might see within these forms is name, stage name, what level you're entering as, what category you're entering as, if you're entering as a solo or a group, their information and their character information. If you're entering as a performance, they might ask for audio you want used, intro you want read. Some might ask for some videos you want played like in the background. If you will need help bringing stuff on stage, a lot of things. If you're entering as a craftsmanship, you typically don't need as much information, but sometimes they might ask you to write an introduction for you. But a lot of times when it comes to craftsmanship walk-ons, typically they just read your stage name and your character name, you go on, you pose, you get off stage, you know, stuff like that. But there has been some conventions that I have entered where they actually have asked the craftsmanships to give them an introduction about who they are and the work that they do, you know, stuff like that. Another big thing that they might ask for you is a build book. What the heck is a build book? A build book is, as it sounds, a book detailing how you built your cosplay. Build books are just a way for judges to be able to go back and reference your work when it comes to picking winners, you know, everything like that. While this is not required at some conventions and it's just kind of an extra optional thing that you can do, some do actually require it as part of their applications. But I will say that this is becoming a lot more of a popular requirement. So it's always best to just practice putting one together, even if the convention doesn't require it for the application. Also, the judges will thank you too. One question I tend to run across with build books is how much should you include and how long should they be? Now, some conventions do have limits about how many pages your build book should be. Typically, people would recommend keeping it around 10 to 15 pages, but I have seen conventions who have like a maximum of 10 pages or a maximum of 13 pages. You know, it really depends. But my best word of advice is to keep in mind with like normal competitions, judges don't have a lot of time to be flipping through a 20-page book. So it's always good if you are not sure how long to make your build book, just keep that part in mind. You kind of want to put yourself in the judge's shoes to say, well, if I only have 20 minutes to deliberate and I have all these build books I have to go through, how quick am I going to be able to flip through the build book? Typically, this is what a build book should include, but always do your own research. There are great examples of build books out there, but typically it's a cover with your name and character so they know who the build book is for, reference photos, fabric swatches slash inspirations as to why you picked the ones that you did. Such an example, if you're making like an idol outfit, maybe you lean more towards sparkly fabrics because, well, you want that stage ready look. So it's always good to just have a page to kind of note that, but usually a lot of times they're not really required. Like the fabric swatches aren't really required, but a lot of times judges do really like that. Photo progress of the cosplays, such as build photos of, say, a shirt of a cosplay and so on. Typically with that, you want to try to give each section their own page. So the shirt will have its own section, pants will have their own section. You can include notes of said parts, but try to just keep them like to the point. Like don't write a novel, like just keep like a bulletin point, be like, this is why I did this. You can also include techniques you might have learned during this process, because I feel like the one thing judges really like within these competitions is you showing, one, you know what you're doing, but also that you're willing to learn new things to create these cosplays. One big example that I've recently done in some of my build books is that I have been trying to get more into learning how to 3D model so that I can like 3D print some of my parts of my cosplays and not use like pre-made 3D models. And so since it's something that I learned, sometimes I include it in my build book to be like, I am learning 3D modeling. Here's my 3D modeling process of like what I learned to do this part better, you know, stuff like that. If you're able to, sometimes including a full photo of you in the cosplay is also a great reference for the judges. Also, typically with my build books, I also like to add a section of the inside of the cosplay. Because a lot of times when you are in the judging room, which we'll talk about later, they don't really see the inside. So, like, if I lined a full cosplay and I want the judges to know, yes, this is fully lined, typically I do what I call the guts page, where I just include photos of what it looks like from the inside so that they know that it's all nice and neat as well. Some things that you shouldn't include is things that went wrong that are in the cosplay, unless you are including it to show how you fixed it. I saw someone on Reddit say, you want to treat it like a job application. You know, you don't want to walk into a place with a resume being like, here is everything that I did wrong. Give me the job, because most likely you're not going to get that job. So say if on the inside you have a very messy seam that you just could not cover up no matter how much you tried, you act like it is not there. Also, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I saw someone on Reddit, because I did do some research because I wanted to make sure I kind of got like the more general tips and tricks that people usually give. But I saw one post on Reddit where this guy was just like, here's what you should include in the build book. And for some reason, he said to include injuries that you got during the making progress. No, do not do this. Do not do this. Absolutely not. The judges do not want to see photos of injuries that you got while making the cosplay. They do not need to know about that. That is just the fact that someone said that with like full confidence is crazy to me. If I was a judge and I was flipping through someone's build book and I saw that they just included a page of like, here's this cut on my hand that I had to get stitches for, like, I would be like, absolutely fucking not. Like, that alone would, for me, would be like, yeah, you're losing points for that. So just don't do that. Don't do that at all. Now, I do want to go back to my previous point on what I was saying, including photos of the build process. I personally try to focus on what I think the judges would find more interesting. For example, if I'm making a shirt for a cosplay, I'm going to include that I drafted my own pattern. And if I used any special techniques, such as special seams or anything like that, but I'm not going to sit there and include, here's the shirt at the patterning stage. Here's the shirt when I first sewed it together. Here's the shirt as I sewed it some more. I added the sleeves. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be like, here is a photo of me drafting my own pattern. Here is the shirt primarily sewn together. Here is me adding some details. And then here is the finished shirt. Just try your best to include just the important parts or the things that you want to kind of show off. So like, say if you learned how to do like a Hong Kong seam, you want to include that. Or French binding, you want to include that. Whew. Oh, what a long-winding section, huh? But now that it is out of the way, you are signed up, time goes by, and you get an email saying, congrats! You are now accepted to enter. Be sure to read these emails carefully. I know people like to just read them and be like, oh cool, I'm in, and then do nothing else. I will say, there is some conventions that know that some people do not read the emails, and these emails usually include a lot of important information, including where it's going to be taking place. Sometimes they include judging times, but usually that's a little bit of a later email. And they also include that maybe you might have to check in certain time or a certain day, so that way you are still within the competition. Because sometimes if you don't check in, they take that as you are dropping out and they will remove you from the competition. But some conventions know that people don't read these emails, so there has been some conventions I've been a part of where they have included a question or a code word within the email that you have to reply with for them to know that you read it and for you to be still considered for the competition. I have known people who have not read the email at all, and then day of the competition find out that they are not in it anymore because they never replied to that email with that code word. So always, always, always be sure to read the emails thoroughly. Now, if they didn't include this in the last email, you could also expect another email closer to the convention with your judging time. Judging times are for craftsmanship only. Performances that are only doing performances do not go through a pre-judging process because the judges are going to be judging the performance at the time of the competition. But typically, prejudging takes place on Saturday of a convention, and usually in the morning. But there has been some conventions that have done it on Friday and Saturday. It really depends the size of the competition. If it's a smaller one, usually they do all the prejudging in one day. But if it's a bigger convention, they have to split it up to give the judges time to be able to see everyone because you can't fit it all in one day before the competition. Now, this is where my script slash note kind of ends, so I'm so sorry if I ramble a lot, but we're going to be talking about the judging part of the competition, which is honestly the last part that we're going to be really be talking about, because other than that, the only thing afterwards is the competition itself. Now, what to expect during a prejudging. So, like I said, typically you get a certain time they have to be there, which you need to be on time. But typically within the prejudging, you go in, you introduce yourself to the judges introduce themselves to you, and then they ask you, are you okay with us getting close to you and taking a look at the cosplay? You can say yes or no. If you say no, that's fine. The judges won't do it. But typically, you want to say yes because that means the judges are going to come up and are going to inspect your work closely. So they are going to be looking at seams. They're going to be looking at details. They're going to be looking at techniques that you use. They're going to be looking at paint jobs you might have done. They're going to be looking at everything. And during this process, they are going to be asking you questions about the process of making the cosplay. So they might have asked you, what technique did you use for this certain part of the cosplay? What was the inspiration behind this part of the cosplay? But yes, they are going to ask you a lot of questions, so it's good to be prepared to answer those questions. But if you made your cosplay, there shouldn't be an issue. Usually, judging time can take anywhere between 5 to 15 minutes. Typically, it's usually 5 minutes, again, depending on the size of the convention, just because they have to get through everyone. But typically with groups get a little bit more judging time just because there's a lot of people there. Judging is done. The judges have your build book. What is next? Well, now you just get to enjoy the convention until the masquerade itself. Typically with masquerades, you are required to be there about an hour or sometimes 2 hours before the actual competition itself. This is just so that they can go through rehearsals for people who are doing performances. They can take time to give you guys the rules about going on stage. And yes, this does include you, craftsmanship people. Now, if you are in a performance, depending on the convention, you might have the chance to go on stage and test the stage, see how spread out you can get, plan where you might put stuff, everything like that. But they're not going to let you bring all your props out on stage. Make sure your audio is good, make sure your video is running. And then after that, masquerade time. Typically, you just get to sit there and just wait for your turn. Some conventions might let you sit out in the audience. Some conventions usually have a green room. And if they are a great convention, sometimes they'll have a video feed within the green room so that you can watch your friends. So now everyone has gone on stage. What's next? Now usually is the intermission of the masquerade. Usually within this intermission, they can have exhibitor skits or performances. Sometimes it can be like a local idol group. Sometimes it can just be the host doing like a quiz show or like something like that. It really differs from con to con. I personally really like the conventions that do like idol performances as the intermission because of the fact that like the idol scene is so big in my area, and it's just nice for them to be able to get a spot on a very big main stage. So I typically like those. But after the intermission is done, the judges come back, and that is when the reward ceremony starts. So the reward ceremony is the judges go on stage. Usually, typically, they introduce themselves a little bit if they didn't do it beforehand. And then they start giving out rewards. You can go back to the point of what type of rewards you can expect, but typically they'll start at novice, and then they'll work all the way up to best in show. Now, let's go for the important part about these rewards. So you are in the masquerade. You get called up for a reward. Say if you only entered as craftsmanship and you win, I'll give you the best scenario. You win best in show for your craftsmanship. What is next? Well, nothing. Once you win a major reward within the cosplay that you are competing in, you are not to enter that cosplay into another competition. And the reason for that is what the community calls sandbagging. So if I was to wear a cosplay to one competition and I win a major reward, or I win a reward in general, and then I go to another competition and I enter the same thing, I already know that this cosplay is capable of winning something. So me just taking it and entering it to someone else so I can get multiple rewards with it is a big no, no. You do not do this. If you are caught doing this, I'm not going to lie to you, the community is very big on shaming you for doing this because this is considered cheating. So, once you have this cosplay and you won this reward, the next best thing to do is just enjoy the fact that you won a reward. You can still wear the cosplay to conventions, obviously. You just cannot enter with that cosplay again. We got the big part out of the way, which is just talking about what a masquerade is. And I think one of the biggest questions that I can answer is what commonly impresses judges? Now, of course, I can speak mostly on craftsmanship, but I do have some friends that I am going to use as great examples with performances, so don't worry. But typically with craftsmanship is you want to show them that you know what you're doing, you're applying the right types of seams for certain fabrics, for certain techniques. You are showing that you are taking the time to do research about how to make a cosplay maybe represent what the culture is coming from. Or for another good example that I mentioned earlier, which is the idol cosplay. If you're making idol cosplay and you're like, I decided to use a bunch of sparkly fabrics because this character is an idol and I wanted to make it look like it was pulled from the stage. Judges really like that. But also on that topic as well, especially when it comes to craftsmanship, you also don't want to overdo it too much. So you don't want to sit there and say, I learned French I learned French seams, so I did it for the whole cosplay. Sure, French seams are cool and a difficult kind of seam for people to do, but if you are applying it to parts that don't really need it, the judges are not going to be that impressed by it because they're just going to kind of be like, why would you imply this technique when you could have done this technique? And another big thing with craftsmanship as well is how put together the cosplay is also matters a lot as well. For example, say if I was making this skirt, I know people know what this skirt is. That's why I'm using it as a good example. Okay. Now, say if I was making the skirt for a competition, and for the white stripe on the skirt, I just cut raw pieces of fabric. I didn't hem them. I didn't turn it into bias tape. Nothing. And I take that fabric strip and I just glue it onto the skirt and it's fraying. You can see the hot glue. It just is kind of a mess. Now, if you take that and compare it to another skirt that I might make of like the same premise, but instead with the white strips, I've hemmed the strips, made them into basically a bias tape, top stitched them on, and it's just more neat put together. That type of skirt is more likely to win a reward than the other one is. Now, I know the topic might come up of not everyone owns a sewing machine, and I totally get that. If your only way of being able to put together a cosplay is hot glue, hand sewing, fabric glue, heat adhesive, stuff like that, that is fine. Just as long as you show the judges that you know what you are doing with. And also, I know the topic might come up of, well, people start somewhere. That is totally true. But if you are just sticking to that and you're not learning ways to apply those techniques in a more neat, more consistent, way, you can't be surprised when you don't end up winning stuff in the future. So the harsh reality with craftsmanship is basically just showing that you kind of know what you're doing. Now, for performances, again, I'm not very versed within this. Like, I have done many performances in my life. It's not in a competition standpoint, but I do have friends that do. And one group of friends that I really want to include in this video as a great example as to what really impresses the judges in a performance aspect is the Weeb Palace. Every time I get the chance to watch one of their skits, I am always like, they have to win something. One of the biggest thing is that when they go on stage, they are giving a strong performance. They are showing that rehearsals happen. They are showing that they know what they're doing. One great example that I want to use is their performance I did recently at PortCon. They did a skit surrounding mobs. I think it was Mob 100, I believe it is. And it was funny. They were doing everything. They took over the stage. One of the things that the judges said as the reason why they ended up winning a reward, they just had a strong performance because something might have been going on at like this part of the stage here, but in the background you had characters who were pretending to talk to each other, they were pretending to pose, they were pretending to fight each other, they were pretending to like do some fun stuff together. It was like the scene doesn't stop all because something might be happening over here. It just felt like the stage was alive. So I definitely recommend that if you want some good examples of some great performances, please go to their channel and check out some of the videos that they have because they do an amazing, amazing job. Another thing that might impress judges when it comes to performances is going on stage and showing that you have this confidence on that stage. Now, I do want to say right off the bat, everything I'm about to say doesn't count for people who might go on stage, might get stage fright, mess up something, you know, everything like that. Because stuff like that happens, but people in groups like that do still end up winning something. For me personally, the ones that I see win all the time is the ones that go on stage and, like I said before, just take it over. They are confident, they have a strong performance, they are showing that they rehearsed, they are interacting with the crowd a little bit, they're interacting with the judges a little bit, they're doing this, they're doing that. You know, it's when you do a performance, you essentially want to be like, this is my show now, and you want to have that confidence. I feel like, to me, that is the type of performances that I really see win a lot more rewards than I do a performance where, you know, it might be, listen, no shade to anyone that does this, but I do see these type of performances win a lot less. But when people go on stage and they are just lip syncing a song and just kind of mad lipping their movements and what they are doing and everything like that, like, typically performances like that don't really win anything because they can come across as a little messy. But yeah, typically that is kind of like the best ways to impress the judges. Now, the next question that I have, I feel like can open up the floor to a very interesting conversation, but I am going to give my thoughts on it. Feel free to, I don't know, disagree with me, but don't, because I'm sensitive. But the question is, what skills defy each of the brackets aside from competition experience? Normally, I've seen cons make you participate in a specific bracket to prevent sandbagging, but I feel this view of brackets needs to be rethought, especially considering there's many advanced craftsmen that are competing for the first time in a bracket under their skill level. Do I look different because I am re-recording this answer on a different day? Yes. Yes, I am. But quite frankly, the reason why is because I took some time to really think about how I wanted to word this question, and I had recorded something else and I just didn't really like the answer. Basically, what I want to say in terms of this, at the end of the day, no one is stopping anyone from entering at a higher level if they see. So, for example, if someone with master level craftsmanship wants to enter as a master level, even though they have no competition experience, no one is really stopping them. The only thing about it is, as long as that person stays in the master's category rather than enter as masters, they don't win anything and they decide to go back down. As long as someone is not doing that, there is no real rule set into place to keep people from just entering at a higher level if they feel like that is where they fit. Which I feel like, yes, can kind of get a little confusing, especially when a lot of conventions have these rules set into place, or at least these standards or a outline of like who can enter what level. But there is no way for a convention to check that. They're not going to sit there and they're not going to vet everyone and be like, you're entering as masters, give me proof right now of all of the things that you have won. They're not going to do that. So while I can understand that the sign up process can be a little confusing because of those standards, at the end of the day, it's really up to the cosplayer on if they feel like they want to enter as a higher level. When I started doing cosplay competitions, like, my skills were pretty okay. They obviously weren't amazing, but because I was just getting started and I didn't really know what to expect, I enter as novice. That's why novice is there. Novice is there to get people started within the competition aspect. Novice isn't just you're a newbie cosplayer. It's quite literally just the starting point of a cosplay competition. So if someone wants to get started, but they don't feel like they're ready for intermediate or masters, that's fine. That's totally fine. But if someone is choosing to stay in a certain level because they know that they can win prizes against other people, for example, if someone knows that they can be in masters, but they decide to stay in intermediate because they know they can continue winning rewards, then that's where the issue comes into play. But if someone is just going by the outline that cons give them in terms of like rewards or anything like that, that's totally okay as long as they're not doing it in an aspect of where they know that they can basically cheat to get these rewards piled up. So kind of calling it sandbagging for people who you personally believe should be in a different category just isn't correct, because what I believe and what someone else might believe can be two different things. At the end of the day, it's up to the cosplayer themselves and the judges in those competitions to decide where they basically belong within that lineup. So if someone enters as like intermediate and the judges feel like that their levels are master level, can move them up to masters by giving them a master's craftsmanship reward, and that immediately moves them up to that level. But if it's just someone who maybe doesn't believe in their skill a lot and believes that they should be in these lower levels, even though like you may think that their craftsmanship is worthy of being a higher level, that's not sandbagging. That's just a person just has a little low confidence, which we all have. But yeah, so at the end of the day, the best way to answer this question is it's mainly up to the cosplayers. To try to say that cons need to rework this whole thing is very difficult, because if you try to stop and think about the fact of how will cons realistically go through and make sure people are, entering as a level as they should be, it's impossible to do that with as many people who, enter into these competitions. A lot of times it's hundreds of people that enter into these competitions. Trying to be like, you need to show me proof of you winning all these rewards for you to be in this category. Yes, they can enter it as like part of the application process, but that's just another part people are going to have to go through and confirm that is real. So while I do understand the fact that at the end of the day, maybe some reworking can be done, what I believe and what you believe and what another person believes does not matter when it comes to the cosplayer themselves and the judges. Now, a good tip that someone left that is something that I kind of struggle with myself, and I need to get better at, is something I learned is to try and always get feedback on what I did right and what I can improve on for next time. Learning what you do better is crucial to any competitor, novice or master. Most of the time, judges are in a situation where the smallest details matter while deliberating. Knowing what place you wear is super helpful. I am one of those competitors that don't go to feedback panels, and I really should, especially at conventions that I don't win rewards at. I really need to get better at going to feedback panels, but that is a very, very, very good point. When it comes to competitions in general, you really want to show that you are willing to learn, that you are willing to improve. And the one way about that is getting critiques, because a lot of the time you don't get the notes from the judges unless you go to these feedback panels. And honestly, the only reason why I typically don't go to them is usually Sunday. It's just I want to chill with my friends before the end of the con day. But I really do need to get better at going to these feedback panels. I really do. But I do agree with that comment in general, where the smallest detail can be what placed you in what reward, what made you not win a reward. And it's good to know those so that when it comes to next time, you know what to improve on. And I know like some people might say like you don't want to go to feedback panels because you don't want your work to be talked about badly and everything. But the judges aren't there to make fun of your work. The judges are there to give you a outside person's perspective of what your work looks like and what they feel like can improve. Because Judges typically are cosplayers who have been in the competitive scene for a very long time and have won major rewards. So they kind of know a thing or two, so it's good to maybe listen to them. A best way that I can kind of describe it is like going to your art teacher for like an art critique about what you can kind of do better. Yes, some of them might not be great at it, but you are going to have that one teacher that is going to give you really insightful views of being like, yeah, you know what? I should try to do it this way instead. Hey guys, I am pulling up stuff on my phone. So I have gotten a question about performances stuff. And the question is, do you have to record your own audio slash choreograph your own dance to participate, or can you just do like a typical idol showcase, cause idol performance? Now, typically my answer would be no. But again, as I said multiple times in this video itself, the best thing to do is to read the convention rules. There are some conventions that the only way that you can enter as a dance performance is that you either choreographed it yourself or you are making it into like a skit. So you have like a skit at the beginning and then you perform the dance for a little bit. A lot of conventions are trying to make it a little bit harder for cause idols to be able to be part of these competitions, which again is a whole separate video, but that does mean that some require certain things like that. But typically, if a con has no rules against cause idols, you can just use the song that you're performing. You don't have to record your own cover of it. Now, of course, if you record your own cover of it, judges might be a little impressed with that. And if you choreograph it yourself, then that's also an impressive skill to show. But typically, you don't really need to. You can just submit the song itself, and you can usually do dance covers and stuff. I've seen many groups who have done dance covers of pre-existing choreograph like stuff, and they've won rewards for it. It just, again, it really depends on the convention themselves. But yeah, that's basically it. I think I kind of covered a lot of stuff within this video, and especially questions, tips, and tricks. But anyways, if you have additional questions that you would like to leave in the comments, feel free to leave those. I would do my best to answer them. Maybe I'll even do a part 2 with more questions. But for now, that's as good as the information that I can give for my experiences. If you have your own experiences and tips that you want to leave as well within the comments, that's also great as well. Thank you guys for watching. I know this was a very long video and I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys found some of this information useful for maybe getting started in your own journey with competitions. But remember, just to have fun at the end of the day. Be a good sportsman. Be a good sportsman when it comes to other competitors and stuff. Don't be a sore loser if you don't win anything. You know, at the end of the day, it is just a chance for you to show off your work while also getting rewards as kind of like a plus. Anyways, bye.